The Last House on Blackwood Road. My name is Jack Carter, and if you ever go to Blackwood Road in the North Forest of Montana, USA, remember one thing: never go near the house at the end of the road. Because some houses are not empty, some houses wait. And this story is about the night I tried to end that wait. The year was 2018. I was a freelance photographer and traveled to different states in the United States. At that time, I was in the remote forests of Montana to take pictures of mysterious places. There, I met an old man at a local bar. His name was Walter Hansen. In conversation, he asked me, "Do you really take pictures of scary places?" I laughed. Yes. He sipped his coffee silently. Then he said, "So take a picture of the last house on Blackwood Road and show it to me." Everyone in the bar fell silent. I felt as if the temperature in the room had suddenly dropped. "What's there?" I asked. Walter looked at me. There was a strange fear in his eyes. "If you want to save your life, don't ask." That was the sentence that piqued my interest. The next day, I set off for Blackwood Road with my camera and drone in my car. The road continued to enter the forest. As I continued, the mobile signal disappeared. Clouds began to gather in the sky. About an hour later, I reached the end of the road. And then I saw it. That house. The house was two-story, old, dilapidated, and unusually quiet. Dozens of dead trees stood around the house. It looked as if nothing living had been there for years. But the strangest thing was that all the windows in the house were boarded up from the inside. Except for one. A window on the second floor was open, and there, someone was standing. I stopped. A thrill ran through my body. The person in the window was looking straight at me. But he was too far away, so his face was not clear. I zoomed in on the camera, and as soon as the image became clear, my hands started to tremble. He was not human. His face was unusually long. His eyes were completely black, and his mouth was open in a strange smile. I immediately tried to take a picture, but as soon as I pressed the shutter, he disappeared. I told myself that maybe it was a trick of the light, but my heart was not ready to give in. I went closer to the house. The front door was half open. Even without the wind, it was slowly moving. Chirr, chirr, chirr. It was completely silent inside. I took out my flashlight. There was a thick layer of dust on the floor. But there was a problem. There were fresh footprints on the dust, as if someone had walked in just a few moments ago. And these footprints were heading straight for the stairs leading up. I turned on the camera, started recording the video. Then I slowly started climbing the stairs. The wood creaked with each step. Chirr, chirr, chirr. Upon reaching the top, I was standing in front of the room where I had seen that thing in the window. The door was closed, but there was a soft whispering sound coming from inside. It sounded like several people were talking very slowly at once. I put my hand on the door. The whispers stopped immediately. The whole house fell silent, so quiet that I could hear my own heartbeat. Then suddenly, someone knocked softly on the other side of the door. Stop. I froze. A few seconds later, again. Stop. Then a third time. Stop. My hands were soaked with sweat. I was about to open the door when someone whispered right next to my ear, "Don't open." I immediately turned around, but there was no one behind me. My heart was pounding. I turned to the door again and turned the handle. The door slowly opened. See-char-rar-rar. The room was empty, completely empty. No furniture, no people, nothing. Just an old wooden chair in the middle. And on that chair, there was a photograph. I went closer. I picked up the photo. It was a family photo. Mother, father, and a boy about 10 years old. Behind the photo was a sentence written in ink. "We locked him in the basement." A shiver ran down my spine. At that moment, a loud explosion sounded from below. Bang! The whole house shook. I ran to the stairs. But when I got there, my blood froze. The front door was closed, and on it was a new sentence written in bold letters from the inside. "That hadn't been there a few minutes ago. Now you're inside too." I stopped breathing, and then a child's terrifying laughter echoed from the basement below the house. Ha ha ha. Finally, another one has arrived. The thing under the basement. The child's laughter echoed throughout the house. Ha ha ha. Finally, another one has arrived. My heart was beating so fast that I felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. I immediately ran to the main door, turned the handle, but the door didn't open. I tried with all my might. Nothing happened, as if the door had been welded shut from the other side. Then the sound came from the basement again.
Bang.
It felt like something heavy had hit the wall below. Then another.
Bang.
And then silence. The silence that starts to scare a person from their own thoughts. I controlled myself. This is all a joke, I said softly. But even my own words seemed to lie to me. I took out my mobile. No signal. GPS off. Internet gone. As if I had lost contact with the world as soon as I entered the house. At that moment, I remembered. That picture. That sentence. We locked him in the basement. Who?
And why?
I decided that the answer could only be found in one place. In the basement. I started going down the stairs. The cold was getting colder with each step. It felt like I was not going inside the house, but into a freezer. When I reached the bottom, I stopped. The basement door was wide open. Even though I remembered that I had locked it, the darkness inside was much deeper than before. Even the light from my flashlight seemed weak. I entered cautiously, and immediately one thing caught my attention. There were fresh footprints in the dust on the floor. But they weren't human footprints. The toes were long, unusually long, and the heels were almost non-existent, as if something was walking on 4 legs. The footprints were heading towards the back of the basement. I followed them. After a few moments, I reached the wall, and there I saw an old iron cupboard. This was the same place where nothing had been before. I could have sworn that this cupboard hadn't been here yesterday. I went closer. The door was half open. Inside were old files. It was covered in dust. I took out a file. It read, Blackwood Research Project, 1974. My breath caught. I began to quickly turn the pages. The first page had an official seal on it, and below that a sentence. Subject 13 shows unexpected behavioral changes. On the second page was a picture of a child, about 10 years old. Name, Ethan Walker. My heart pounded. It was the same child from the family photo. I read. Each page was scarier than the last. The project was to experiment on the human brain. Some secret U.S. government officials were conducting an experiment deep in the woods. But the experiment on Ethan went wrong. Very wrong. The last part of the report read, Subject 13 no longer behaves like a human child. Avoid eye contact. Do not respond if he calls your name. If containment fails, run. Suddenly, something moved behind me. I turned around immediately, but there was nothing there. Only darkness. Then, a voice came close to my ear. Very low, very slow. Jack. My blood froze. I turned the flashlight on. There was no one. Then again. Jack. This time the voice came from the other end of the basement. It was exactly the voice of a child. I didn't answer. The report had just warned. Do not respond if he calls your name. A few seconds passed. Then suddenly the entire basement became silent. So quiet that I could hear my own pulse. And then, the flashlight's light fell on a corner. Someone was standing there. My breath caught. It looked like a child. Its back was to me, wearing old-fashioned clothes. Completely still. Completely silent. Ethan? I couldn't help but say. And, at that moment, I realized my mistake. He turned slowly. Very slowly. In an unnatural way, as if his neck was spinning without bones. Then I saw his face, and my world stopped. He wasn't Ethan. At least not now. His skin was gray. His eyes were completely black. His mouth was unusually open. It was as if his jaw had been dislocated. And his teeth were not human. He smiled. You answered. Suddenly, all the light bulbs went off at once. Burst. The entire basement was plunged into darkness. I ran. I heard running sounds behind me, but they weren't the sounds of 2 human footsteps. It sounded like several hands and several feet hitting the floor at once. I ran towards the stairs at full speed. But when I reached the top, I stopped, because the stairs had ended. There was no house in front of me. I was standing somewhere else. A long underground tunnel, wet walls, rusty pipes, and dozens of doors on both sides. What is this? I said to myself. Just then, a door slowly opened. Scream. An old woman came out from inside. Her face was white with fear. Are you trapped too? She whispered. I was shocked. Who are you? Tears welled up in her eyes. I've been here for 15 years. A jolt of electricity ran through my body. 15 years? Impossible. She looked back into the darkness and said in a trembling voice, He won't let us go. Who is that? Before she could answer, a terrifying scream came from the other end of the tunnel. A scream that no human could ever utter. The old woman's face turned pale. Oh God. He's awake. Then two black eyes appeared in the darkness of the tunnel. This time, much larger than before. Much closer. And beneath those eyes, a long, inhuman smile slowly spread. The hollow boy. Those two black eyes at the other end of the tunnel were staring at us, silently. The old woman and I stood perfectly still. The flashlight in my hand was shaking. And then, the thing started to move. Slowly at first. Then quickly. Then so fast that my eyes couldn't follow it. Just a black shadow. And a few moments later, he was standing in the middle of the tunnel. For the first time I saw him completely. And I wish I never had. He was about 7 feet tall. His arms were unusually long. His fingers were thin and pointed like spider legs. His skin was as gray as ash. And his face. It still looked like a child's face, but distorted. It was as if someone had stretched a human face and lengthened it. There was no white in his eyes. Only a deep black void. He smiled. Jack. His voice was a strange combination of a child's and an old man's. You were looking for me, weren't you? Every muscle in my body was screaming to run, but my feet weren't moving. The old woman standing next to me suddenly grabbed my arm. Don't look into his eyes, she whispered, or he'll get into your mind. I immediately looked away. The thing started laughing. Still warning people, Margaret? Fear crossed the old woman's face. It's been 15 years, he said. You still have hope? Suddenly the walls of the tunnel began to shake. I looked around in shock. At first I thought it was an earthquake, but then reality hit. The walls weren't moving. There were people inside them. Dozens of faces. Human faces. Imprisoned inside the walls. They were watching us silently. Some were crying. Some were trying to scream. But no sound was coming out. My stomach turned. What is this? I asked in a trembling voice. He smiled. My family. A cold wave ran through my body. The people who come here, he said, they never go back. Suddenly a face emerged from the wall. Just a few inches. I froze at the sight of him. He was a young boy, maybe 17. Help, he barely whispered. But the next moment the walls swallowed him up again. I backed away in fear. They're alive, Margaret said softly. They're all alive. It holds their souls. I understood why people disappeared from this place. They didn't die. Something worse happened. Then suddenly another voice came from the far end of the tunnel. Jack. It was my mother's voice. I was startled. My mother had been dead for 8 years. Jack, help me. Tears welled up in my eyes. The voice was exactly the same. One word at a time. One tone at a time. I started to move in that direction without control. No, Margaret screamed. I stopped. She's not your mother. At that moment, I remembered what was written in the file. Do not respond if he calls your name. This thing could read people's minds, their memories, their fears, the voices of their loved ones. It knew everything. The shadow at the end of the tunnel laughed again. You're quite intelligent, Jack. That's why I like you. Then his body began to twist in strange ways. There were sounds of bones breaking. Crack, crack, crack. He began to grow taller. His arms began to lengthen. His face began to deteriorate even more. A few seconds later, he was not 7 feet tall, but almost 12 feet tall. He no longer looked like a child.
It was a nightmare.
His mouth opened to his chest. Inside were hundreds of teeth, and inside his throat, dozens of human faces were screaming. I backed away in fear. Oh God. Margaret began to cry. It's back to its original form. Suddenly, red lights flashed in the tunnel. For the first time, I could see the whole place clearly. This wasn't a tunnel. This was a secret underground research complex. There were numbers written on the doors. Cell 01, Cell 02, Cell 03, and finally, Cell 13. A flash of lightning went through my mind. Subject 13. Ethan Walker. That's where he was kept. But then something went wrong. Very wrong. Just then, a door opened in the distance. And an old man stepped out. He had a white beard. His lab coat was torn. He was surprised to see us. Impossible. He whispered. How did someone get here? I ran towards him. Who are you? His eyes filled with fear. I am Dr. Richard Morgan. My heart stopped. The same name had come up over and over in the files. The same scientist who had experimented on Ethan. But, according to the report, he had died 50 years ago. How is he alive? I asked. Dr. Morgan looked at Hollow Boy, and hatred flashed across his face. Because he won't let us die. Suddenly, the entire complex began to shake. Hollow Boy let out a scream that made my ears bleed. And then, he looked straight at me and said, You will all stay here. Forever. At that moment, red letters lit up on one of the doors to the complex. Emergency containment system activated. And the next second, all the doors began to close automatically. But for the first time, hope appeared on Dr. Morgan's face. He shouted,
Jack.
If we get to the reactor, we can probably kill him. Hollow Boy's terrifying smile disappeared immediately. And for the first time, fear appeared in his eyes. The secret buried beneath the reactor. Emergency containment system activated. Red lights were flashing throughout the complex. The sound of sirens echoed everywhere. And for the first time, I saw fear on the Hollow Boy's face. Just for a few moments. But I did. That meant he wasn't invincible. Where is the reactor room? I asked Dr. Morgan. Under level 3.
He gasped.
But it won't be easy to get there. Why? He looked at Hollow Boy. Because he's changed the entire complex to his liking. Before I could ask anything, Hollow Boy let out a scream that sent dust flying from the ceiling. The next moment, all the faces trapped inside the walls began to move. I watched in horror as they emerged from the walls. One by one, human forms, but they were not human. Their eyes were blank. Their skin was ashen gray, and their mouths were open unnaturally. Run, Margaret screamed. The three of us ran. Dozens of creatures were coming toward us from behind. The sound of their footsteps echoed throughout the complex. I was running at full speed, but every few seconds it felt like the corridor was getting longer. What is happening? I shouted. Dr. Morgan replied, This place no longer operates on the principles of reality. It has changed the entire complex. My hair stood on end. That meant Hollow Boy was not just a creature. He had become a part of the place itself. Or maybe this place had become part of it. We turned a corner and entered a new corridor. There were dozens of old monitors. Some were still working. Suddenly, a screen lit up. A video started playing on it. 1974. A 10-year-old boy was sitting in a chair. Ethan Walker. Before the experiments, he looked like a perfectly normal kid.
Scared.
Alone. Then Dr. Morgan appeared in the video.
Young.
He was sitting in front of Ethan. You don't have to be afraid,
he said.
We just want to help you. Ethan in the video slowly raised his head and said a sentence that made my body freeze. He came with me. The scientists in the room looked at each other. Who's here? Ethan pointed to an empty corner of the room. That. The one that lives under the forest. The video suddenly stopped. The complex fell silent. I looked at Dr. Morgan. His face had turned white. What did that mean? Dr. Morgan answered after a few moments of silence. We realized long ago. Ethan wasn't the result of the experiment. He was already changed. My breath caught. What? We kept thinking the experiments changed him. But in reality, that thing was already inside him. At that moment, the entire complex shook violently. The ceiling cracked, and from somewhere in the distance came a sound that didn't sound like an animal, a human, or a machine. The sound was coming from deep within the earth, from far below, from very deep. Dr. Morgan's face turned pale. Oh no. It's awake. Who? I asked. It didn't answer. It just started running. We ran after it. A few minutes later, we arrived in front of a large steel door. On it was written, "Reactor level." The door was half open. We went inside. It was a huge round room. In the middle was the reactor, glowing with blue light. But my attention was immediately drawn to something else. There was a huge hole in the middle of the floor, maybe 100 feet wide, and inside it was complete darkness. Such darkness that even light would disappear. I went to the edge.
Peeked down.
Nothing was visible.
Then
something moved. Far below, so deep that the eyes could barely see. But I saw an eye. Just one eye. But it was so big it looked like a house. The life went out of my legs. I immediately backed away. What was that? Dr. Morgan looked down. The real problem. My heart stopped. Not Hollow Boy. He shook his head. No. Hollow Boy is just a door. The whole room fell silent. I thought I might have heard wrong. Door? Yes. He looked into the dark pit with deep fear. Something has been sleeping under the forest for thousands of years. Ethan had come into contact with it, and then he became its source. Suddenly, the lights in the entire reactor room went out. Darkness. Complete darkness. Then a familiar voice rang out. You told them everything, Doctor? My blood froze. Hollow Boy. But this time his voice was coming from all directions. From the walls. From the ceiling. From the floor. As if the entire complex was speaking. Then slowly dozens of black eyes began to open in the darkness. 1. Then 2. Then 100. Then 1,000. And all the eyes were looking at us. Hollow Boy started laughing. It's too late now. He's waking up. At that moment, a roar came from the pit beneath the reactor that shook the entire mountain. And from within the darkness, a giant claw slowly began to rise. The deep one. The giant claw was slowly emerging from the darkness. My breath caught. I had seen countless terrifying things in my life, but this was more than a terrifying creature. It seemed as if an ancient nightmare had been buried deep within the earth itself. The claw was not black. It was a strange gray color. Its surface looked like stone, but veins were moving inside it, as if a living thing were enclosed in a stone shell. Then the claw stopped at the edge of the reactor room, and the next moment, the entire complex shook. Bang! Chunks of concrete began to fall from the ceiling. Red emergency lights began to flash. Hollow Boy's voice rang out again. He's awake. Finally, there was joy in his voice. A joy that would make a person fear. Dr. Morgan quickly ran to a control panel. If it fully awakens, everything will be over. What? I shouted. This won't just be a problem on Blackwood Road. It will destroy the entire state. A chill ran through my body. What is this? Dr. Morgan replied, trembling. The local tribes called it the Deep One, a being that fell from the sky thousands of years ago, and then buried itself beneath the earth. I couldn't understand anything, but before I could ask any more questions, something stirred within the pit of darkness. Huge. Unimaginably huge. Then, a second claw appeared, this time even bigger than the first. And then, a face. I may never forget that sight until I die. It was not like an animal. It was not like a human. It was not like anything that could be described in words. It had dozens of eyes on its head. Each eye looked in a different direction. Its mouth was vertical, and when it opened, there was another mouth inside it. Then another. Then another. It seemed as if there were countless mouths inside it. I recoiled in fear. Margaret fell to the ground. Oh God. She began to cry. It's real. At that moment, I felt something strange. The creature was looking at me, directly, despite thousands of eyes. I was sure it was only looking at me. Then a voice suddenly echoed in my head, without a word, without any language. But I understood him. "You're afraid." My head began to ache violently. I fell to my knees. Suddenly, strange images began to appear in my mind. Ancient forests, countless corpses, ancient people worshipping a giant shadow, and then a child, Ethan. He stood alone in the forest. The year was 1974. He peered into a deep crack in the ground, and from there, something looked back at him. That was enough. In that moment, everything changed. My head began to hurt. The images suddenly disappeared. I was back in the reactor room. Hollow Boy was laughing. "He showed you, didn't he? Now you understand." My eyes locked on him, and for the first time, I understood something. Hollow Boy himself wasn't the real enemy. He was just an infected child. A child who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But now he was part of this thing. At that moment, Dr. Morgan shouted. I got it. I ran towards him. He pointed to an old screen. There was a map of the complex on the screen, and a red dot was flashing. Primary core overload. I looked at him. What does that mean? He took a deep breath. If we overload the reactor, the whole complex will be destroyed. And maybe, just maybe, this thing will go underground again. But there was no conviction in his voice. Only hope. And hope seemed very weak. Then Hollow Boy's smile disappeared. He looked at us angrily for the first time. Very angrily. No. Just one word. But the whole room shook. Then he screamed. And suddenly all the walls of the complex began to crack.
Bang, bang, bang.
Dozens of black creatures began to emerge from these cracks. The same people who had been imprisoned in the walls. But now they had completely changed. They were no longer human. They had become Hollow Boy's army. Hundreds of creatures began to move toward us. Margaret screamed in fear. Dr. Morgan looked at me. Jack, if you want to survive, you have to decide now. Either we destroy the reactor, or leave the whole world in danger. I was about to answer, when suddenly a familiar voice came from behind me. Jack. I froze. It was my late father's voice. Exactly like that. I slowly turned around, and in the darkness stood a human figure. He looked like my father, but his eyes were completely black, and he had a smile on his face like Holloway. False faces. The shadow standing in front of me looked exactly like my father. Same height, same voice, same face. Even his old military jacket was the one he often wore. But one thing was wrong. Very wrong. His eyes were completely black. So black that even the light was lost in them. Jack, he said again. Son, listen to me. A thrill ran through my body. 12 years had passed since my father's death. I had seen his funeral with my own eyes. It wasn't him. It couldn't be. That's a lie. I said softly. He smiled. Do you really believe that? Then he said something that only my father knew. A secret from my childhood. An incident I had never told anyone. My heart stopped. How? Hollow Boy's laughter echoed throughout the complex. I don't just see your fears, Jack. I see your memories too. Your past. Your pain. Your every weakness. I gritted my teeth. This wasn't my father. It was just playing with my mind. Suddenly Dr. Morgan shouted at me. Don't look at him. The longer he holds you, the stronger he'll get. I immediately backed away. My fake father's face began to change. First the smile disappeared. Then the skin began to peel. Then the same ashen face appeared from under it. And the next moment the creature was absorbed back into the walls. But the problem wasn't over. Because now the entire reactor room was moving. Hundreds of mutated humans were moving towards us. Their eyes were blank. Black smoke was coming out of their mouths. And they were all repeating the same phrase. He's awake. He's awake. He's awake. Their collective voice shook the entire complex. Dr. Morgan was working rapidly on the control panel. I need 5 minutes. He shouted. Only 5 minutes. After that, the reactor will overload. I looked around. 5 minutes? It seemed difficult to survive 5 seconds here. At that moment, the first creature reached us. She must have been human once, but not anymore. Her jaw was open to her chest, and her fingers had become like long daggers. She pounced on me. I jumped to one side. Her nails dug into the wall. The concrete cracked like clay. Oh God. If it had hit me, my body would have split in two. Suddenly, Margaret picked up an iron rod from the floor and hit the creature's head with all her strength. Thaik. The creature fell back, but only for a few moments. Then she stood up again, and this time, angrier than before. They don't die, Margaret screamed. Dr. Morgan replied, because they're not alive. Hearing this sentence sent shivers down my spine. Just then, a terrifying roar came from the pit beneath the reactor room. The deep one was moving. Its giant eye was slowly rising. Now it was more visible than ever. And inside that I
saw something.
Dozens of human faces, screaming, begging for help, as if they were trapped inside this creature. I immediately looked away. My head was exploding from just a few seconds of staring. Then the entire complex shook violently.
Bang.
A section of the ceiling collapsed and fell down, and landed right next to Margaret. She narrowly escaped, but the next moment a transformed creature pounced on her. No, I ran towards it, but it was too late. The creature sank its sharp claws into Margaret's chest. Its scream echoed throughout the room. Blood splattered on the floor. I reached for it, but seeing her condition made me understand. She couldn't live much longer. Margaret held my hand, trembling. Jack. There were tears in her eyes. Stop her, or else. There will be no one left. I tried to say something, but her words were incomplete. Her grip loosened, and her eyes closed forever. I stood still for a few moments. Then Hollow Boy's laughter rang out again, this time louder than before. Another. Join my family. My anger began to overcome fear. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. I was angry, very angry. At that moment, Dr. Morgan shouted, Jack. I turned to him. The red words on the control panel were flashing. Reactor overload initiated, and a timer was ticking beneath it. 9:59, then 9:58, 9:57. Dr. Morgan's face turned pale. There's no turning back now. But at that moment, Hollow Boy's voice changed. For the first time, there was fear in it. Real fear. And then a terrifying scream echoed throughout the complex. A scream that could probably be heard miles away in the jungle. The Deep One had extended its other arm as well. And now, he was coming up.
Fast.
Very fast. The last 10 minutes. The red numbers on the reactor timer were steadily decreasing. 9:41. 9:40, 9:39. Every passing second brought death closer. But the problem wasn't just the reactor. The real danger lay below us. The Deep One. The entire complex was shaking. The walls were cracking.
Pipes were bursting.
Steam was spewing out in all directions. And the roaring from inside the pit was now louder than ever. I peered down, and immediately backed away. Half of the Deep One's body had now emerged from the pit. Its head was touching the ceiling. Its dozens of eyes were darting in different directions, and strange ancient markings were glowing on its skin. It seemed as if something older than all of human history was buried underground. And now she was about to be freed. We have to go, I told Dr. Morgan, but he wasn't moving. He was staring at an old file. What happened? He slowly raised his head. And for the first time I saw complete defeat in his eyes. I made a mistake. A very big mistake. His voice was trembling. It was all because of me. I tried to save Ethan, but I turned him into a door. Then a memory suddenly flashed through my mind. That first video in the files. Ethan's words. He came with me. I stopped dead in my tracks. Doctor, if Ethan is the door, can the door be closed? The room fell silent for a few moments. Then Dr. Morgan's eyes widened, as if he had remembered something he had forgotten. Oh God, he whispered. Maybe this is the only way. What? He quickly turned on a computer. A few moments later, old files appeared on the screen. The original report from 1974. And below that, a sentence. Subject 13 remains primary link. My heart pounded. Primary link. The main link. That meant that the Deep One was still connected to this world through Ethan. And if Ethan could be stopped, then maybe this creature could be stopped too. But there was one problem. Hollow Boy was still alive. And more powerful than ever. Suddenly, the entire complex was plunged into darkness. The red emergency lights also went out. Only the blue light of the reactor remained. Then a voice was heard. You guys are still trying? Hollow Boy. But this time his voice was different.
Weak.
Very weak. I immediately looked at Dr. Morgan. He had felt it too. It's scared. I whispered. Yes. For the first time. Then we saw him. Hollow Boy was standing on the other side of the reactor room. But now he didn't look the same. His body was breaking down. His skin was cracked. And black smoke was coming out of those cracks, as if his strength was running out. No, he said angrily. You don't understand. If I'm finished, then he'll be completely free. I stopped. This was new. Until now he'd been forbidding us to stop the reactor. But now he was afraid of his own death. Or maybe something else. Then a thought suddenly occurred to me. You're a prisoner, I said. Hollow Boy fell silent. What? You don't serve him. You're his prisoner. For a few moments he said nothing. Then for the first time, he saw sadness in his eyes. Real sadness. I was only 10, he said softly. I just wanted to go home. My heart stopped. 50 years later, somewhere Ethan was still there. Inside this monster. At that moment, the terrifying roar of Deep One echoed throughout the complex. And Hollow Boy screamed, as if in severe pain. Black smoke began to rapidly emerge from his body. And then, for the first time, I saw Ethan's true face. Just for a few seconds. A frightened child.
Crying.
Begging for help. Then the scene disappeared. But now I understood. The real battle was not with Deep One. The real battle was for Ethan's soul. I looked at the timer. 3:12. Only 3 minutes remained. The entire complex was collapsing. Large sections of the roof were falling. And Deep One had now almost completely emerged. Its giant head hovered above the reactor room. Dozens of eyes were staring at us. Then he spoke directly for the first time. His voice wasn't words, but a feeling, an order, an ancient hatred. You can't take my door away from me. At that moment, the entire floor cracked. Dr. Morgan and I fell in different directions. Hollow Boy screamed, and light began to come out of his body. Intense white light. Dr. Morgan's eyes widened.
Jack.
Now I understand. Ethan is the key. If we free him, then the Deep One will lose contact. I looked at Hollow Boy. There were tears in his eyes. After 50 years of torment, he was asking for help for the first time. And the last digits on the timer were ticking. 158, 157, 156. Time was running out, and we had to decide. Stop the Deep One, or save Ethan, or maybe
both.
The last secret of Blackwood Road. The reactor timer was ticking down. 142, 141, 140. With every second, the entire complex was getting closer to collapse. The roof was collapsing. The walls were crumbling. And hovering above us, the Deep One had almost completely broken free. Its thousands of eyes were fixed on us. In each eye was hatred. A hatred that seemed older than human history. I stood in the rubble. My body was injured. I was gasping for breath. But my eyes were fixed on Hollow Boy. Or maybe on Ethan. Because for the first time, I could see a frightened child inside this monster. Black smoke was coming out of its eyes. Its body was breaking. And it was screaming in pain. Jack, he said weakly. I don't remember. I have to go home. A strange pain shot through my heart. 50 years. For 50 years, this child had been a prisoner of this entity. And now, maybe for the first time, he had a chance to escape. Suddenly, Dr. Morgan approached me. Blood was streaming down his face. There's only one way. What? He pointed to the center of the reactor. Ethan has to be separated from Deep One.
How?
Dr. Morgan was silent for a moment. Then he said softly, "Someone will break contact, and that person will not survive." A cold wave ran through my body. Just then, the roar of Deep One echoed throughout the complex. The floor cracked again. The giant claw moved towards us. Only a few feet away. I knew it. Time was running out. 0:58, 0:57, 0:56. Suddenly Dr. Morgan smiled. A tired smile. "It was all my fault, Jack. I should end it." Before I could say anything, he ran away, straight to the core of the reactor. "Doctor," I screamed, but he didn't stop. Deep One reacted immediately. Thousands of eyes focused on him, and then the entire complex began to shake. Hollow Boy screamed in pain. "No, no, he'll take me." His voice was that of a child now. Pure fear, pure pain. Dr. Morgan reached the core of the reactor. He entered the final code on the control panel. And then he looked at me. "Jack, to tell the world this story." There were tears in his eyes. To tell people that Ethan wasn't a monster. He was just a kid. The next moment, he pulled the lever. Emergency link severance activated. The entire complex was bathed in white light. I closed my eyes, and then I heard a scream that must have echoed around the world. Deep One was screaming, for the first time, in pain, in fear, in anger. His thousands of eyes began to explode, one by one. His body was filled with cracks, and at that moment, black smoke began to pour out of Hollow Boy's body. Then, I saw him, a 10-year-old child, Ethan Walker. He stood in the light, just like he had in the old photos. He looked at me, and smiled for the first time. A normal child's smile. "Thank you," he said softly. Then his body began to transform into light, and a few moments later, he disappeared, forever. At that moment, the Deep One screamed for the last time, and began to fall back into the earth. His giant body sank into darkness. The pit began to close. The roof began to collapse. The reactor was close to exploding. I ran with all my might. Corridors were collapsing. Walls were crumbling. There was fire everywhere. And then, I don't remember what happened. 3 days later, I woke up in a hospital. I was found unconscious on the edge of a forest. According to rescue teams, the house at the end of Blackwood Road was completely destroyed. The ground had caved in, and all the tunnels beneath it were gone. Dr. Morgan was never found. Margaret was never found. The complex was never found. According to official records, the place had never existed. But I knew what was true. I had seen it all with my own eyes. And then, a year later, I decided to go there again. Just once. Just to make sure it was all over. The forest was silent. The house was gone. The ground was flat, as if nothing had ever been there. I started to walk back. Then something caught my eye. A small picture, half buried in the dirt. I picked it up. It was a picture of Ethan Walker. The same old picture. But this time there was something new written on the back of the picture. I turned around, and my blood froze, because there were only 4 words written there. The door didn't close. I stood still. Then, from the depths of the forest, a child's soft laughter was heard. Ha ha ha. And somewhere far away, under the ground, something very large moved. The end, or maybe the beginning.
The end.